All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode 21 of the Fully Remote Talk Show. This is the first talk show for leaders adapting their style to a remote first world. Today, we are talking about running inclusive virtual meetings. I think the cost of running a bad meeting is pretty high, and what it takes for someone to run a good meeting is a lot. It's a really hard to run a good meeting, whether it is like your big presentation style meeting or like even a small collaborative meeting. A meeting hero is responsible for a lot of things. I mean, she has to like define the purpose of the meeting. She has to set like who are the right persons invited for the meeting, from creating the environment and the right mindset for people, stimulating discussion, being inclusive, having stage presence, communicating effectively, aligning minds, driving outcomes. All of this is the responsibility of this meeting hero, and it's a lot of things to do. And so we are constantly thinking and talking to people and leaders who do this well and ask them for tips and how we can do this, and also understand how we can make a platform like Zinc lift a lot of this heavy weight for the leader so it makes their job easy. But today we're talking specifically about two styles of meetings. One, like the more higher presentation meeting with a higher audience, a higher number of audience, and then the other one, which is like running inclusive meetings. These are the topics that we're talking about. And who better to talk about this than Vidya? Vidya, welcome to the show. We
Thank
are
you.
super glad to have you here. And for those who don't know Vidya, she is a product manager at Meta by title, but she is a lot more than that. She has great insights about career development. She talks about leadership and women in tech in many forums, including online by writing articles, as well as panelists and a speaker in conferences. And I've had a chance to like see some of these things that Vidya has posted on LinkedIn, and it's very inspiring. Uh, in the short time that I spoke with Vidya, she had great insights that about virtual meetings and about inclusivity that I was super excited to bring her on the show today and talk about this. Welcome again, Vidya.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you, but before we do that, I just do this brief check-in with the folks that are here. Is just like a one word. If you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go? Just type your answer as a word or a phrase in that box that you see. Just take 5-10 seconds to check in with the present. Cut out from like the rest of the busy Thursday that you've had, and share your thoughts. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go today, right now? The idea is to get everybody to zap out of the real world and like get into a mode of interacting, asking questions over here. Um, it's also an interactive show, so you can type your answers and we can see the answers right now in a few seconds. All right, Hawaii looks like a more overrepresentation. Hawaii, Iceland, Egypt, London, Switzerland. Nice. I like it. A lot of summer destinations as well. Islands of adventure. Okay. Someone has clear, great ideas over here. This is awesome. Wherever you want to be, you actually can be there and attend this show as well. But now that you are where you are, please be present and like share your thoughts and ask questions of Vidya or to me on anything on this topic. With that, jumping in directly into the show, Vidya, welcome to the show. I want to start off by asking you a little bit about your journey, right? Like just briefly, how did you come about with being from like a product manager at Facebook? There are tons of these people, this larger than life, like all these talks about this. How did you get started on that?
Yeah, so I guess from an early age, I've always felt that there's more than one dimension to everyone's life. From where I was doing schooling, my mom kind of got me exposed to, music and arts and, you know, dance and singing and whatever, right? So I experimented quite a bit, I would say, from my childhood, and I guess like that trait kind of carried forward. So when I started working, like I was given a lot of advised by really well-intentioned folks about, hey, when you start, and especially as you're entering corporate America, like your work should be your number one priority. Like, if you want to succeed, you really have to, be heads down at what you're doing. That's the only way you can grow. And I tried doing that for about 6 months, and I was really depressed because it was it almost felt like I had to put everything else that I like doing on pause and just focus on this thing called work. And according to me, work is really important, but it's one dimension of what makes me me. So what I honestly did was I started experimenting, in a true product management, spirit, like of A/B testing. I slowly started, doing different things and seeing, is that really impacting my work? Right. So at some point, I think I found my balance between, what are the right number of, talks that I should be doing per month,
Hmm.
or per week, and what are the right number of organizations, and what causes should I be associating myself with, so that it doesn't feel like an overhead but rather comes naturally to me. Right. So I experimented quite a bit, and I speak about the things that I like doing now, but for each of those there are at least 10 things that I did not like, or it was not quite got a good fit. Right. So now I write quite actively on LinkedIn. I've done over like 100 talks, and I'm very selective in the types of like talks I do, because one, it has to make sense for me and the audience, right? And two, it has to be a good, mutual fit, and the topics need to make sense and all that stuff. So, but work is, I like being a product manager. I really think, I was one of the lucky ones who started her career as a PM, because I think I would have been a really bad developer. And I honestly thought when I was doing my master's that, when you graduate from, when you study computer science, a developer or a tester is what you usually are. Because when I started out 10 years ago, these were the more prominent roles, right? So PMing was more of a experiment again that I did for 3 months with Microsoft. I'm like, yeah, like I'll do an internship. How I'll know if I'm succeeding or not. And then I really like. So I was definitely one of the lucky ones who kind of like found the perfect role, from the get go, I would say. But I love being a product. I love building products. So
Nice.
yeah.
This is great. I love how you're using terms like A/B testing in real world, and that clearly says a lot about your product inclination over there. Awesome. Just also briefly about this sort of move to virtual. This last 2.5 years ish is been probably where like most of the people have gone from being a remote friendly team and a remote friendly organization to being a remote first team and a remote first organization. So just tell us about like what your journey, where did it start about like this virtual thing, and where is it right now, and like where have you found your balance there?
Yeah. So I was at Microsoft, interestingly, working on Microsoft Teams when the pandemic hit.
Ooh,
So
okay.
I was in fact working on the team that was in trying to grow Microsoft Teams.
Hmm.
So it was very interesting when the pandemic started. When we first started, obviously it was like a puzzle to everyone. On like, what does it even mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, we got to work from home.
Right.
So, but because I was working on Teams, we use Teams a lot. It kind of came naturally, I would say. But when you look at how any meeting or any platform where people collaborate with, because I think of meetings essentially as, it's all about collaborating to achieve some common goal,
Right.
right? And communication plays a really key part in this process, right? So the way I think about it is like how you communicate like ties back to how we direct and receive energy.
Hmm.
That's it. Like
Hmm.
that's the simple map at the end of the day, right? Like like in this collaboration, if I'm giving you a monologue or if you're giving me a monologue, I'm sure like the audience are going to drop out, right?
Right.
Because that energy plays a very important role, and how people express energy is very different depending upon who they are, right? Like I think in the classic terms we use introversion or introverts or extroversion or extroverts, and fundamentally if you think about it, like how introverts and extroverts direct and receive energy is very different.
Right.
And that's what the combination of these people is what defines the theme or energy of the meeting itself, right?
Nice.
So for me, tying back to your question, I'm naturally an extrovert, right? So for me, being not having access to people in 3D
Hmm.
and being restricted to a 2D screen at first felt weird, because I really value the water cooler chats and I value the walk to the meeting room, because I like to know you not just as your title at the workplace, but you as a person.
Right.
I'm the person who remembers your cousin's kid's name. So but when you're coming into a 25-minute or 30-minute meeting, there's not really enough time for all this chatter. But the chatter is what is important to actually build those relationships and build that trust, right? So that honestly, for me was the harder part, because I'm like, hey, my whole premise of how I build relationships and how I bring the team together and how I build morale is now, I got to rethink this whole framework, right? So that was honestly the hard part. Like, I can speak for 8 hours straight. That doesn't drain me. But what was interesting was just rethinking the whole premise of what does fostering a team mean in this remote first world? What does and especially as a product manager, you're kind of like the conductor of the orchestra,
Right.
right? You basically have to bring a team that is 25, 30, 40 people strong, and make sure that you're driving alignment, you're getting commitment, you're all marching towards the common goal. And at first it was really hard to figure all of this out virtually, right?
Hmm.
When you just cannot like walk into somebody's office and just like, hey, can we go for a coffee or chat, or can we just go for a walk and talk about this problem, because now everything had to be scheduled. So that, I think, is figuring that out is what I think took a little while to me. But yeah, but it was a very interesting journey, to be honest.
Awesome. Did you figure it out, or like what was your process in figuring that out for you?
So for me, I think I don't think anybody has fully figured out completely
Of
yet,
course.
because I
Yeah.
think, as you mentioned in your intro, right, like conducting a successful and inclusive meeting is really hard, because when you just like pause and go and audit your calendar, think of how many meetings shouldn't have been a meeting,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, think of how many meetings you went to where you walked away with no incremental improvement to the state of the product or the decision or the question at hand, right? So just being very thoughtful, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, honestly, because as a product manager, sometimes I'm triple booked for
Mm,
a particular slot. I'm like, so I really have to like figure out which meeting makes the most sense. Where should
right.
I really go? Where am I really needed, right? And also, as I mentioned before, um, a lot of context switching and a lot of like getting you know uh, the context from the right people at the right time and decision making. Now, all of this, the question for me was, can I do this async without having
Mm,
to pull everybody into every meeting? Because what happens is, when you are bombarding people with meetings, you're not really giving them time to focus,
right.
and everybody needs time to focus. And as a PM, I definitely need time to focus. I need at least like 3 to 4 hours of heads down time to go right. So that's when I honestly figured out the power of writing.
Right.
So this it's communication. When we say, there's a lot of emphasis on like verbal communication, but very little on written communication. Like, that honestly is, to your question of how did you figure out how to run effective meetings, is actually through very effective written communication.
That's great. That's actually a very, very important insight. Yeah, I think I've been hearing this quite a bit for people. Is like they all like discovered their hidden talents of writing, or if not, like they developed it, because that seems like you cannot ignore it right now is what it feels like. So that's a great insight. And have you as a team or so like made changes to your processes or culture? Because the reason why I ask is that, like, not everybody, like for example, like you actually faced this sudden change from like the 3 to the 2D being really hard for you for as an extrovert, but not everybody has the same kind of problems. Or like some people this might be an advantage, for some people this is probably like a bigger disadvantage. And so walk me through, like, when you saw in your team, how did it affect different people differently? Tell
Yeah.
me some other examples there.
That's a really good question. And I think this again goes back to a fundamental premise that people are very different.
Right.
What energizes me might actually drain you, and vice versa. Right? And when you are trying to bring a group of very diverse people and together to work on something really hard and complex, you really have to make sure you give the platform for everyone to shine, so that you're able to maximize their throughput, right?
Right.
So what I've noticed is, again, going back to my extrovert and introvert framework, right? For extroverts, everyone brings their strengths and challenges, right? Like, the strengths could be, you're able to speak your mind out, you're able to like really, you have a faster response time, or you're able to easily hop from one virtual meeting to another for 8 hours straight without that really draining you, right?
Right.
But a challenge might be that you might miss a sense of belonging, or you might you know
Mm.
um, accept too many meetings that you're actually not able to get any heads down time to actually do the focused work, right? Or you might unconsciously interrupt other people who might be
Mm.
introverts a lot
Right.
more than you might realize, right?
Mm.
Because in a physical meeting, you can observe body language, like somebody might like raise their hand, or somebody might start to move a
Yeah.
little bit closer to the desk so that you want to say something, and you might notice the physical body language that might help you pick up that, oh, okay, Arjun needs to talk now, like let me give that person the next opportunity. But in an online world, unless the platform you're using supports like a raise hand or whatever feature, it's going to be really hard for you to figure out, who should be talking next, or who has their hand, virtual hand raised, right? So you might actually end up interrupting a lot more people, and that is the opposite of running an inclusive meeting. Because one person, I don't know if you're aware of the hippo, like the the
Yep.
person, the
Highest
hippo in
paid
the room,
person.
like, right? So you might end up becoming the hippo in the room, right? But
Right.
for an introvert, what I noticed are, your strengths might be that you have the ability to synthesize information in a very thoughtful manner. You might get enough space to process at your preferred pace and stuff. But this again ties back to the conductor of the meeting. Are they really giving you the space to process the way that you want and you're comfortable with, right? So that
Right.
honestly is the patterns that I noticed. And some of the tips that I picked up on how to run an effective meeting. Like, I've observed a lot of people over the past 2.5 something years. And some of the tips that I really picked up that I absolutely loved is, one, being really mindful of, should this be a meeting?
Mm.
Is this really, does this topic or does this question or does this decision warrant a meeting? Can this be done async?
Right.
And I do that quite a bit. I really ask myself when I go to the calendar too, like, is it really required to be a meeting? And I also decline a lot of things. Like, I'm like, when I, if the meeting is not set properly, or if I don't understand the context, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't understand the context, so I'm going to decline this. Let's do this async, right? So that's the number one tip that I picked up, which has been super useful. The second is, have every meeting should have a really clear goal, right?
Right.
In fact, I went to the extent of adding the goal of the meeting in the title. So I add, before the title of the meeting, I add, in parentheses, is it an alignment meeting? Is it a working session? Is it a review? Is
Mm.
it time sensitive? Right? So it becomes very obvious to the attendees that, okay, this is a time sensitive review meeting, and Vidya thinks I need to be there. So let me, go and look at the, next step here. Right? And the next step is the agenda and the pre-read. If
Mm.
there is no agenda, I decline that meeting. If there is no pre-read,
Mm.
then I question that meeting. And
Mm.
if I set up something, I definitely make sure there is a clear agenda. Hey, what is the agenda of this meeting? What is the goal? When we walk away after the 25 or 30 minute, what is it that we should have achieved? And a lot of the topics, especially the topics that I work on, are very complex. It is impossible to give everyone all the context in 20 meetings, 20 minutes, right? So I make sure that I have a very elaborate pre-read, and everybody will read the pre-read. And the advantage of pre-read is what I said before, that if you're an introvert, and or a person who just takes needs time to process information, pre-reads are excellent because they help you process information at your own pace, and more importantly, they'll help you add questions in line, right? So
Right.
it becomes very effective. Like, if you write a crisp pre-read, that meeting is going to be phenomenal, right? And the last one I think is also figuring out for high stakes meeting. And
Mm.
when I say high stakes meeting, these are the meetings where you have a lot of leaders in the room, or a lot of people, who are otherwise hard to get into a room, right? I actually delegate roles for each of these
Mm.
high stakes meetings. So, like, I am the SDO, single thread owner of, or the driver of the meeting, or the conductor of the meeting. I will have a dedicated person who's my note taker,
Mm.
right? I will have a dedicated person who's monitoring chat, because it is very hard for a single person, at least it's hard for me, to take notes effectively and run a meeting and monitor chats and engage with everybody on the call,
Nice.
because
Yeah.
you're multitasking too much, right? So I try to make sure that there are specific roles. And finally, I would say, is a good wrap up, right? Like, just making
Mm.
sure that you send the meeting notes, and especially if there are follow ups. We joke internally in the product management community that it's easy to run meetings, but it's a complete waste if you don't follow up on the meeting,
Right.
right? So just making sure that there are clear follow-ups and making sure that you have the POCs attached with the timelines. So I will,
Right.
if you think about all of these things, right? I mean, like you think like, wait, for a 30-minute meeting, we got to do all of that.
Right.
Right. But what I realized over the course of time, going back to your original question, is as you start picking up these things, your meetings are really effective,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Love it. I think this is great. I mean, I want to like put this title over here when we're talking about this again, right? Like this is an amazing uh, 5 tips that you shared over here that I really like. It's like, should this even be a meeting in the first place? Having these defined purpose. I like the idea of like having tags that you actually have as the part of the subject of the or the title of the thing. Love that idea of like having tags to the meeting, a great agenda and a pre-read, and the assigning the different roles to the person. And again, this is also like in a tags. You're this person, and like clearly having that, and then like the great wrap up and follow through of it. Love these tips. Love these tips, and like very very actionable and very very doable. It seems like, but you're right in that like if you're inviting 10 people to a meeting and like it's like a 30-minute meeting, if you take another extra 15-20 minutes doing it, you're saving so many other people's time. And so if you just like do the simple minute math over here by number of people, you will know that like this is going to save a lot of time, not like make more work for
Yes.
you. So
And I heard, in we used to joke in one of my, previous teams on the dollar amount for every meeting.
yeah.
Because if you count the number of people, let's say you have 15 people, and if you like average out their pay and their
Yeah.
pay per hour, you will be surprised that many times you will be in, tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth meeting,
Yep.
right? You don't realize that because you're like, yeah, what's an hour? But when you attach a dollar amount, you start, noticing a pattern of, damn, like time is precious.
Yep, and that's kind of what I tell as well. Like especially like these higher, like company-wide meetings, like an all hands or so, is like easily like tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of meeting, and like even for a smaller company, I mean, like the size of Meta, it's like probably in the millions of dollars. But like I'm talking about like even the
Yeah.
smaller companies, it's like a tens of thousands of dollars, which is uh, the cost of a bad meeting or like spending a bad time over there is like super high, and so.
Yeah.
Um, Makes a ton of sense. While we are on this sort of collaborative meetings and being inclusive as well, another question is like, I mean, we touched upon a lot of these things even earlier on, like, it's like building that trust, building that belonging and everything. Um, when an organizer is running a meeting exclusively, I mean, specifically about like bringing all the voices, making sure everybody is seen or heard, what are some good tips that you can do? Because in a virtual meeting, easily people can turn off their cameras and hide behind it and like sort of watch
Yeah.
YouTube on the side if we need be, right? Like, so how do you like make sure that like everybody is not just a passive observer but a willful participant? How do you move the needle towards that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? Because you need to make sure that the people who are in the meeting are actually contributing to, arrive at the question at hand or the goal of the meeting, right? The few tips that I've picked up over the course of the years are, one is, again, going back to a solid pre-read. And sometimes when, in the agenda itself, I just say that, hey, agenda number one, let's say, align with XYZ leadership on ABC, and I actually attach the owner is so and so person,
Mm,
right? So attaching the roles in the agenda itself now puts, kind of the responsibility and makes them accountable that they'll have to do the background work and make sure that they're updating in that meeting, right? So when you attach
mm,
POCs for each section, and especially as a product manager, as I mentioned, I work with a very, very broad XFN team. And a lot of times I don't make the decisions, but I make sure that the right people are involved in collectively making the decision,
right.
right? So in the agenda itself, attaching POCs really helps. And secondly, what I noticed is, in the beginning, I used to, my intention was good in the sense that, I would want everybody to kind of share their perspective, but the way I
Mhm,
was doing it was probably not the most inclusive way, because I was saying, hey, Arjun, what do you think?
mm,
What I'm
mm.
doing in that is I'm putting you on the spot.
Yep.
If we did not pay attention for
Oh,
the previous 5 minutes, now you are in a very awkward spot. I just put you on the spot, and you have no idea what we are discussing. And
right,
that's a very uncomfortable place,
right.
right? So what I instead, figured I should be doing is, when I noticed that, in a meeting, there are a few people who never had a chance to speak,
Mm,
I specifically say, hey, now let's hear from the folks who didn't get a chance to speak. Is there anything
mm,
else you want to add?
mm.
So when you
Got
keep
it.
it open-ended, like that, you're still calling out that, hey, I want to hear from people who didn't get a chance to speak,
Mm,
right? So if there are people who were, shy to raise their hand or who raised their hand and went unnoticed, the stage is theirs now. But at the same time, you're not calling and making somebody uncomfortable by calling out their name, because you can very well say, "Yeah, no, I agree with everything, nothing else to add." That's a perfectly
right,
acceptable response,
right,
right? So
right,
this is, a fine balance that I picked up where, you're still giving the space for everyone in the team to contribute, but at their own pace.
right. I love it. Yeah, I think I've been one too many times caught, like, put in a spot, caught napping in some ways, and I totally hear what you mean. Is being inclusive in a way that is uh, you know not taking people out of their comfort zone, and like still making them like sort of in their same mindset to contribute.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I'm going to quickly shift gears into this other types of meetings around like these bigger presentations or speeches, or like where it's not essentially like a one, I mean, many to many kind of a meeting, but more like a larger audience.
Yeah.
um, Here, sort of different things come into well, like how do you do the storytelling, how are
Yeah.
you going to, like, sort of convey your idea to somebody, how are you going to inspire them, how are you going to communicate effectively. I'm sure you've done a lot of this both at work as well as like sort of outside of it, and so maybe the top tips on this would also be super helpful here.
Yeah. So we're talking about, a presentation where it's more of one to many, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what was interesting, Arjun, was I the first talk I did virtually. I've been public speaking for a long time now. Ever since I started working in tech, I would say, but it's mostly been in person, right?
Mm,
But with the shift to remote work or virtual meetings, the first time I did a talk, I was really in a dilemma. I'm like, what does it even mean speaking to like 100 people through a screen,
right,
right? Like, because I can't really see all the people, and I am really a person who derives a lot of energy from the audience.
right.
So it was very confusing for me. Or like, how am I going to keep these 100 people hooked for 30 minutes? That's a really hard problem,
Yeah.
right? So what I picked up was, um, first, I'm very very explicit about the time of a talk.
Mm,
I really think an optimal talk should be no longer than 20 minutes.
got it.
20
Mm,
minutes is what you should talk, like do the one way thing. And after that, you should break it out for questions or make it an interaction or break into small groups. So I, in fact, recommend all the organizers who reach out to me for talks saying, hey, if you got 1 hour, great. But no, if I talk for 1 hour, 90% of your audience will leave. The retention rate is going to be terrible. So let's not do that. Instead, let's break it down like this. So 20%, 20 minutes, let me, do, the talk itself. And then the next 10 minutes, let's do this. The next 10, 20 minutes, let's do that. So I think 20 minutes is the optimal. There's a reason why TED Talks are 15, 20 minutes,
right. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's the right balance between, making sure that you have your audience attention, but also, giving you enough time to kind of convey something meaningful, right? So the tips that, actionable tips is what you asked. So what I learned was, one, you have the first 3 minutes to hook your audience.
mm,
Do whatever it takes, but 3 minutes. In the three
mm,
minutes, if you're not able to get your audience attention, it's gone case. Okay.
mm.
So be really creative. And I use a lot of music to actually hook my audience. So I start my talks with
Awesome.
songs, because
Nice.
I'm also a singer. So I actually use that to my advantage. And pretty much every talk, even if it's a very intense topic, I actually start with a song that is, kind of relevant to the topic, right?
I feel like it's a missed opportunity. We should have had you sing a song over here to start with. But yeah, please, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but what happens there is, because it's very unexpected, and you don't expect someone to come and sing a song when you're talking about mentorship versus sponsorship, for example.
Mm,
People are immediately like, wait, what is happening here? Okay, oh wow, she's singing. Okay, so they start paying attention. So I got, like, in the first 3 minutes, I'm able to hook the people, right?
mm,
And I do use, slides, but it's very, very minimalistic,
mm,
right? The only reason I use slides is for people to kind of follow along the journey, and I give them a visual structure of, hey, in the next 20 minutes, we're going to cover this and then this and then this. So
Right.
minimalistic slides help them map, right? So even if they miss something, they're still able to come back to, where we are. And I always say this in my talks, like a good talk is like a good book,
Mm-hmm.
right? So every talk is a story. It needs to
Right.
have, an exciting and, gripping beginning. It needs to have a middle where, they're able to learn something and an end to remember,
Right.
right? So in this, so I always try to have very minimalistic slide, maybe a single word or a picture, right? So they're still able to follow along. And I try to make it as interactive as possible. I actually, when I give talks, I ask people, hey, turn on your cameras.
Mm.
I don't want to look at static pictures and speak. It's like, turn on your cameras. I want to look at your reactions and, make it interactive. And I ask a lot of questions, and I say, hey, how many people have done this? And, raise your hands, physical hand or virtual, whatever works, right? So
Right.
when you throw in, instead of making it a monologue, when you make it, in an interactive, discussion, people pay attention. And I try to weave in a lot of storytelling, you
Mm.
know a lot of storytelling. I bring in like personal experiences and, make it relatable, because when you make it
Mm.
relatable, people pay attention, right? And I include humor in it, because
Mm.
we're all, we have enough meetings to go, so let's make the, even if it's a serious topic, I actually try to, infuse some sort of, relevant humor in it, right?
Right.
So, and I think it's easier to say all this, but I have to practice a lot.
Mm.
I have to like practice, and I have a lot of people come and tell me, hey, I want to be a public speaker, where do I start? And the first question I ask is, why do you want to be a public speaker?
Right.
Because it's very hard. Like it's like any other skill. When you are having 100 people devote their 30 minutes to you, that's a very precious gift you're getting.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you are giving them something valuable in return. So I always ask them, why do you want to be a public speaker? Right? If it's not for the right
Right.
reasons, it's probably not something that you should go and, do, because it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of investment, time and energy, and it has to be something that you really like doing. And I really like public speaking. Like I actually derive a great sense of energy by doing things like these. I'm happier when I do things like these, and I'm really satisfied, right? So you really have to believe that, you want to do this and then invest. And I've done this for 10 years, over 100 talks. So I really know my strengths. I know the topics that I'm comfortable doing. I know the topics that I will never speak about, right? So I think, like I've mentioned, all the way, I think the theme of this talk is experimentation. So
Right.
experiment, experiment to figure out, the balance here, so that, you can practice.
Love it. Yeah. I think these are super insightful. I think some of these are like, like the effective storytelling, effectively like laying out a conversation. I mean, like a talk is all great. And I think this couple of things that you mentioned in the last around, like how this takes a lot of effort. People want the outcome, but like, you don't see like what it takes to like build this. And I mean, this is all great. I want to like, it's like obviously I have like a lot of follow up questions on this as well, but I'm going to like, just give an opportunity for others if they have any questions. Again, there's been a raise hand anytime. Like, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to ask it, or if you want to type a question, I go ahead and do that as well. Like, so we can actually like take a couple of questions. They're slowly coming towards like the end of this talk over here. But I want to ask you one question while people are like coming up with these other questions as well. Is now that like these things are happening virtual, how can you leverage technology to like improve the quality of these presentations or even meetings, right? Like your meetings. How can you like not try to mimic what's happening in the real world, but like truly like take advantage of this virtual medium to do that? Any thoughts that you have on that, or what have you done in the past that's worked well as well?
you know like the small feature over there, I see that to the right, like it says ask anonymously, right?
Right.
Even
Yeah.
small things like these make a lot of difference, because a lot of people might just not be comfortable asking questions, but the moment you say you can ask anonymously, it's going to open up, help them, do something, even if they're not comfortable doing it. I think,
Right.
a lot of times, when we look at meeting, we just look at, the perfect, user journey of, yeah, somebody creates it, somebody sends an invite, somebody accepts it, somebody joins, and, somebody wraps up. But we just, most tools kind of revolve around those. But they don't really look at the diversity of personalities. And does my tool work for introverts? Does my tool work for extroverts? Does my tool work for somebody who doesn't have a good camera, right? So does my they don't we don't really, a lot of tools don't look at these edge cases, right? So I think when you start looking at, when you start sizing the opportunities of people who are just not comfortable showing their face on cameras, I'm pretty sure we can come up with a couple of features to help those people, right? And similarly, as I mentioned, like right now documents are, you know also look, when you look at like what are the key entities for a meeting, like you need to have a set of audience, you need to have some physical entity such as a document or a deck or something. Like right now everything lives separately,
Right.
right? Like your meeting tool and your documents or deck are completely different. So the onus is on the organizer to kind of find the right links and attach them, and then make sure everybody in the meeting has access to the document. These are all small tasks, but when you accrue doing the same thing, 5 times for 5 days in a week, that's a lot.
Right.
So seamlessly trying to weave in, hey, what are all the entities needed for a meeting?
Mm,
Does this meeting, can this meeting have a poll? Then how can we
right.
make sure that the organizer or the audience have access to that easily without having to look around? I think
Right.
technology can definitely do these things. I mean, there's so much AI,
Right.
available already around. When you know that these set of people are coming together, I am semi confident that we can figure out why are they coming together to discuss
Right.
what, and what relevant topics, what relevant documents do all of these people have in common that we should be recommending to attach,
Right.
right? So it's small
Right.
things like these, I would say.
Love it. Yeah, I think this is it's a great point that you bring. Is that like right now meetings are like a silo. It just happens in an ephemeral medium, and then like goes away once it's done. And like your responsibility to capture it, tie it to your rest of your world, and like do it is on you at this point of time. But like a platform could carry a lot of this. We see a couple of questions over here. I'm gonna see. I'll take this question. What is the worst part when presenting to a large audience? Yeah, just a couple of questions, and then like we can wrap this up over here.
Yeah, the worst part, I would say, is when the audience don't interact.
Mm,
I'm like, give me something like a head nod, I'll take that. Like
right,
when people are just still, you're like, are you getting, like, are you frozen? Like, is your camera frozen? Like, I don't get it. Like, I in fact have called out some people in the talks. I'm like, okay, you guys, like, I need something else from you, come on. Like, I'm all animated over here and you guys are like just still. So I think that's the worst part, to be honest. And especially because as a speaker, your goal is to make sure you take a point and you convey it to the audience. So the feedback that you give is really important, and it doesn't have to be like generous words. It just a simple head nod does wonders. Because what happens, I always say, when I was learning and practicing public speaking, one of the tips that I had was find an angel in the audience.
mm,
I always say this to anybody who comes and asks me, hey, I'm nervous. How can I fight, stage fear or whatever? I'm like, find an angel in the audience. Because, somebody, when you're in a physical room, there's going to be somebody. If there is nobody, then plant someone in the first row who will
mm,
actually nod along with you, or who will like smile at you, who will like give you the thumbs up when you are doing the talk. It makes a huge difference because
right.
you need the signal that
Yeah,
yeah, what you're saying is reaching. And in a virtual meeting it's very hard when
yeah.
people don't interact. So I think that's the worst part when presenting to a large audience.
Love it. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You mentioned very well about like it's a transfer of energy, and we don't receive a bit of the energy back. You almost feel like it's going into a void. Great question as well. Last one. What meeting tool feature solution do you wish existed that doesn't?
This is a good one. I honestly feel something that will help me. I write a lot, as I mentioned before,
Mm,
something that will help me tie my documents to the right meetings without me having to go and do the manual work. I wish really that existed. That'll save me personally a lot of time,
mm,
because I don't have to worry about access controls. And I also work in a very sensitive area. So a lot
mm,
of the documents are locked down,
right.
right? So I have to manually go and, make sure that, oh, okay, these 5 people, do they have access to this document? Or what about that document? It's a lot of, work back and forth. So I actually wish an intelligent way to attach the right documents to the right meetings and automatically give access to the right people. I would pay. if it's a paid upgrade,
Awesome.
I would pay to have that.
Perfect. Uh, this is great. I think that's we're coming very close to the end of the time over here. So I'm going to start the wrap up. When I am wrapping up, I want to call out what's upcoming episode. Next week, we have Will Curran coming, and he is going to talk to us about the future of events and conferences for a remote first organization, and specifically around how often should like remote first organization meet in person if at all they should. And this is a great topic that Will and I had like a great brief chat about. He's coming here next week, same time, to talk about this. So folks, tune in back for that. With that, I'm wrapping up over here. Anybody has any top takeaways from today, please feel free to share that on the side of the screen over here. But if not, like it's like say bye and you're free to leave. But Vidya, I want to definitely thank you for an awesome time and like great insightful conversation over here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I feel like it went really fast.
Yep.
So
I
I'm
I
hoping
I
it's a good thing.
I see this too. Like, it's like I just saw the time and now it's like 5:40 and I have to wrap up. Like, I saw that too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but thank you
thanks
for
for
having me. I love the tool. I think it definitely adds, a lot more color to the meeting and the energy of the meeting. So love the tool. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
thank you so much, Vidya. Yeah, we look forward to having you in more Zinc sessions and would love to like follow up with you and hear about your Zinc experience as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Take care, y'all. Bye bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Vidya. Have a good one.
Bye bye.
Uh, Thank you, Madhuri. I don't think I had a chance to like say hi to Madhuri, who probably joined a little bit later. I think you're muted. If you have a chance to unmute, like, would love to like say hi as well. But if not, it's totally fine.
Yeah, hi, hello everyone. It was a great session. I've been following Vidya for a really long time now and big fan of her speaking skills and everything. So, a great session. Thank you so much. And by the way, I'm a new grad product manager and struggling and just starting off with the, into the world of product management with a lot of meetings. So, this was a great session, really helpful. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
Madhuri.
Vidya.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad it resonated. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Madhuri. I appreciate your feedback and thought on that. And good luck with whatever is ahead. Seems like a great time to be in product management from at least what Vidya is saying. So this is great.
It's a hot role, man, these days. Everyone wants to be a PM. Uh,
Yeah,
it's a hot role. Yeah. Anyways.
yeah, yeah. All right.
All
All right,
right.
folks.
Take
See
care.
you.
Bye bye.
I'll wrap up. Bye bye.
Bye.